Okay, guys, so the fallout continues from Donald Trump's administration leaking war plans to a reporter by accident. And this comes in the form of Piers Morgan, who's been a pretty, I would say, ally of the current Trump administration. And Trump himself, he's been praiseful in most of the things they're doing, which, it's pretty interesting to say the least. But in this case specifically, he actually goes after the administration, calls them completely incompetent, basically disgraceful what happened, calls for Mike Waltz to be fired, which is a pretty big step. Probably the first major criticism of the administration I've seen from Piers Morgan. And he has a number of Republicans on the panel who basically like, oh, this isn't that big of a deal, and we're going to show some clips from that as well. But before we go any further, here's Piers Morgan's monologue, basically eviscerating the current Trump administration and saying someone's got to go. This is unacceptable. And if this was Joe Biden and that was his administration, the Republicans would be losing it, calling for arrest, people to be fired, et cetera, et cetera. You know it's true, and I know it's true. So before we go further, here's a clip of Piers Morgan's monologue talking about this. And guys, by the way, make sure to like and subscribe. It's super good for the algorithm. It helps out the channel immensely. And my Patreon link is in the description as well. So here is a clip. We'll talk about it
was
after.
indicted for keeping classified files at Mar-a-Lago. President Biden avoided being indicted for keeping classified files in the garage next to his Corvette because the special counsel felt he was an elderly man with a poor memory. In each case, the other side has demanded jail time and resignations galore. That is the nature of modern tribal partisan politics. So it's difficult to blame Democrats in their current punch-drunk miasma of despair for seizing on moments like this.
How did a Trump-hating editor of The Atlantic end up on your Signal chat?
You know, Laura, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but of all the people out there, somehow this guy who has lied about the president, who has lied to Gold Star families, lied to their attorneys, and gone to Russia hoax, gone to just all kinds of lengths to lie and smear the president of the United States, and he's the one that somehow gets on somebody's contact and then gets sucked into this group.
Seems quite clear that Jeffrey Goldberg was sucked into his group by Mike Waltz, who was the one that added him to the group. The Atlantic editor was able to see Vice President J.D. Vance, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, among others, discussing an imminent bombing raid on the Houthis in Yemen and making Europe pay for it. The consequences were limited. The US attack on the Houthis was a military success. Trump's position on Europe paying its fair share for defense is perfectly clear already, but it's still incredibly embarrassing. And Mike Waltz got a bit closer to the correct response when he said this.
Well, look, a staffer wasn't responsible, and look, I take full responsibility. I built the group. My job is to make sure everything's coordinated.
But how did that number?
Execute
I mean, I don't mean to be pedantic here, but how did the number?
Have you ever had somebody's contact that shows their name, and then you have somebody else's number there?
I never make those mistakes.
Right? You got somebody else's number on someone else's contact. So of course I didn't see this loser in the group. It looked like someone else. Now whether he did it deliberately or it happened in some other technical mean is something we're trying to figure out.
It shouldn't be too hard to figure that out. President Trump is the grandmaster of deny and deflect, and he has enough legitimate grievances with the way he's been treated by legacy media to repeatedly pull that off. But with respect to Mike Waltz, he's no Donald Trump, and this might have gone away a lot faster if his first response had been, I'm sorry, this was a monumental cock-up, it was incredibly stupid, and I won't do it again. Instead, Goldberg's been attacked for saying the chat included classified information and detailed war plans, but failing to prove it.
Now, the Secretary of Defense and the White House press secretary have said you're lying, have said there are no war plans there, have said there's no classified information. So the obvious question is, shouldn't you now demonstrate it? Shouldn't you publish the text?
No, because they're wrong. They're wrong.
But how could you prove that you're wrong? Maybe should you provide them to the House and Senate Special Committees on Intelligence, maybe? I don't know.
Wow. Well, you want to become my lawyer?
Well, Tim Miller will be joining us shortly, and The Atlantic has indeed this morning published compelling new details on why the chat was clearly classified and obviously did include war plans. The texts make it blindingly obvious that that was the case. That only strengthens the point. President Trump's first 65 days in office has been a whirlwind blitz of reform, and there's plenty to celebrate and plenty to debate, arguing that whether the dog ate Mike Waltz's homework should never have been allowed to take centre stage. For the first time in his second presidency, it's time for the president to wield his formidable index finger and use the words that made him world famous. You're fired.
Okay, and there it is. And again, pretty blistering there, ending it by saying you need to fire this guy because he's basically damaging the credibility of your entire administration as if it hasn't been damaged significantly already. So the fact that Piers is, for the first time, really coming out after Trump and his administration, maybe it's a sign of things to come for Piers, because maybe he's finally waking up to like, wait a second, this administration might be incompetent. And a lot of that monologue is focused specifically on Mike Waltz. But listen, Pete Hegseth, too, caught in a lie, basically saying there was no war plans leaked. And then Jeffrey Goldberg is like, okay, I'm going to call your bluff and release the plans. Basically, Pete Hegseth listing when we're going to attack, listing the specific details. We're going to attack at this time. We're going to attack this target. We're going to attack so-and-so. And apparently there was an actual CIA covert person in the chat as well, which is, again, wild. Imagine if other people were caught up in this and they had access to this information. What could have possibly happened? It could have been a national security disaster for the United States of America. Again, it's pretty wild stuff what we're seeing here. And the fact that nobody has quit or been fired yet is just wild. And you know what? Who is going to do the investigating behind this? Kash Patel? You think he's going to be really looking into this? Of course not. That's why it's so damaging when you have an administration and a lot of the Department of Justice and the FBI. They're all basically Trump lackeys. Kash Patel is a Trump loyalist 100%. It's not really how the government is supposed to operate and how it's supposed to work. Again, Mike Walt needs to be fired. That should go without saying. And the fact that he's going on saying this guy's a loser, obviously he's trying to coddle Trump, and basically he's playing to Trump. He knows he's trying to say, listen, Jeffrey Goldberg is a fool. He tricked me somehow. Mike Walt added him to the group chat. That's what Jeffrey Goldberg released today. Pete Hegseth is lying when he said there was no war plan to discuss. He should be fired. And frankly, this is illegal. I mean, if this was a normal person doing this, a normal military person, they would be indicted, they would be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. But because they are in power, they're not going to be. What a disgrace. What a disgrace this entire thing is. And good for Piers for actually calling it out as well. I mean, again, this current administration, I mean, it's just wild. And it goes to show you that all of these officials are texting in a group chat. I mean, the entire cabinet. Why is Scott Bessent, the Secretary of the Treasury, in this chat? Can someone tell me that? What a joke. And then you have the CIA director, John Ratcliffe, and you have the DNI director, Tulsi Gabbard, at the Congress yesterday, basically arguably perjuring themselves, some would say, because they said, yeah, there was no classified info in there. War plans aren't classified? That's like the most classified thing you could possibly be talking about. Attack plans on Yemen. That seems pretty classified. What if people had access to that before? That's as classified as it gets, actually. What a freaking disgrace this entire thing is. What an absolute joke. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comment section. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll keep you guys up to date with this story. It's been a wild one. I'll let you know if Mike Walt is fired, which, hey, that might be coming, you would think. And frankly, Hegseth might be walking him out of a job too. All I'm saying, imagine this was a Biden administration, and Piers talks about that. Imagine what these people would be saying if it was a Biden administration. It would be a 5-alarm fire. Fox News would be going nuts. But because it's their side, they're scared to call it out. It is a disgrace. They should all resign in disgrace. And frankly, maybe even more than that is needed. Maybe they should be prosecuted. But that'll never happen. Because frankly, the people who are in charge of the Department of Justice, they're Trump lackeys. They're not going to do anything. Disgraceful. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. It's super good for the algorithm. I'll see you later.